Good morning everyone, or good afternoon, good evening, depending where you are in the world. Hope you're all well today. I'd like to cover over what you currently do with Revit 2016 to the Virtual Environment 2016, and then look at, there's been some changes from Autodesk with regards to Revit 2017 to achieve the same process, so we'll cover that. And then we'll go and look at the new BIM Interoperability Navigator. So first of all, the key modelling points. We're aware some of you may be new to the BIM faculty, so we'd just like to, and may be new to the actual trying to make this process work, or you may be infuriated with it. So we'd like to clear that up and show you the steps, the key steps. This I'll reiterate through the Navigator as well. So the first key thing is identifying what you're going to export from Revit. Now I'm using Revit as an example here, as the polls that Neil's just showed you, the majority of people are working with Revit and IES together. There are other packages, but generally the same rules apply when you're trying to achieve a clean export, and I'll discuss that as we go through today. So the key one there when you're looking at Revit is whether you're using Revit Rooms or Revit Spaces. And when I discuss these today through the session, although thermally and when you're building up your building design, zones do matter, what zones and spaces are. But with regards to exporting IFCs or GBXMLs, when you're looking at a volume, a room or a space, when I just say them, I'll intend the same thing. It's obviously, yeah, like I say, the different packages have different understandings of what these are. So in the left-hand side, if you're using Revit Rooms, you'll see a blue interior fill, and the right-hand side, you'll see the green interior fill. So that's one key identifier for what you're actually going to use for your export process. If we can just go back to that slide, actually the other key thing which I'll touch on as we go through today is just the way the model looks. It's quite sparse. It's got just the walls, the windows and the doors in the model. There's no other details. It's not to say that you can't add details like this, but as we'll discuss how you can handle that as we go through. One of the other key things to set is, if you've set in plan view, you've placed a room or a space throughout your model, you need to check how they are actually being applied vertically up through the building and how you're handling and more importantly the ceiling voids. Are you considering them within your model? Are you going to set these spaces or volumes so that they go from one finished floor level to the next, and you'll deal with the ceiling voids in another method? And again, we'll go through these options today. So once you've actually run through the basic modelling, you're looking at the data that you can actually export. You've got different options depending on what you're choosing. So if you're using Revit Rooms, you can use the first options there: location, building type, constructions and room names. And if you move on to Revit Spaces, you can add in all the rest there, which I'll touch on again. So if you're using Revit Rooms, you just need to, on the export option, make sure that the include thermal properties options ticked on there to make that process work. Then you'll be able to extract that data from your Revit model direct. If you're using Revit Spaces, you've got these additional options. You can take across not only the room names, the room type, you've also got the occupancy, heat gain per person, and also lighting loads and power loads. And these are found when you select a space or a room in your Revit model. You can see these in the property information. You can also tag constructions within your Revit model and drag across actual thermal data if you trigger that within the construction within Revit. So to cover what you did previously with Revit 2016, basically when you went to your export GBXML file option, You tick your export default values, open up the building constructions option, and then once you've done that, make sure that the override options within that dialog are all unticked. If you don't do that, you'll end up exporting the default analytical constructions there. You may want to do that early on. You may not have an idea of construction, so that's fine. And you may just decide to set up that information once you're in the virtual environment. Once you get into a more detailed model, you may want to actually take that data across, so you don't want it losing that information. Even if you don't use the data when you actually transfer, it's good to tag it so you know where it is, so you can replace it as well. For Revit 2017, Autodesk have made a few changes. So what you need to do is go into the Analytical Energy Settings option and make sure that under the Advanced Settings you tick the Detail Elements on. Then once you've done that, obviously save this, then go back and export, go to the Export GBXML. Now a key thing here is you have to make sure that the model is in a three-dimensional view, or it won't allow you to activate the GBXML export. With Revit 2016 you had to have the model in a plan view or a elevation view to achieve this. So then you can go to these advanced other options. Sorry, before that you have your Export GBXML dialog that comes up, which is a new dialog where it will ask you to choose either energy settings or use room space volumes. For an export, to export your GBXML from Autodesk Revit to the virtual environment, we would point you to use room and space volumes. Once you've done that, you go through the same process, make sure export default values is ticked. Then look at the building constructions option, and once you're in there, this is where it's the opposite of 2016. You need to make sure that all these default values, that override option there, are all ticked on, which it will just do the reverse. If you don't have them ticked on, then you will export the analytical constructions there. So it's once you've actually built your model, there is a checklist that you can go through. Make sure that you've got a room or space placed throughout your model, everywhere, including risers, store cupboards, ceiling voids, lift shafts. It's key that you do not have any external or any air gaps internally within your model. So an area of the model that's not got a volume accounted for, as it will create an external surfaces within your building envelope. Once you've checked that, then you look for room bounding elements that are set in your model. It's good practice at the early stage of your actual design process to get together with the rest of the design teams and just choose which elements you're going to use as primary room bounding elements. The reason for this is that if you have multiple elements set, it can interfere with the GBXML. So if you can agree with your design team your level of detail at the outset of the project before you start building any of your Revit models, then this can be carried through the whole design process. And as I've said, it doesn't mean that you can't place in these other elements. You just need to check the room bounding option within Revit to see if that will have an effect on the GBXML export. It's quite often, this is a key one, that it quite often creates a problem when you export the model, and just having one primary external wall and one primary internal partitions set as room bounding, then these can be key to having a lot cleaner export. Point 3 there, defining your upper and lower boundaries. This comes back to, again, with setting your levels that you place your rooms or spaces within your model. If you set out early on to set these and decide what you're going to do with your ceiling voids, probably early stage models you can ignore the ceiling voids and add them in later into the VE model if that's just the update. we've got tools that can do that very, very quickly within the VE. And again, you might be just wanting some early numbers, so you're not really wanting to tie up the design too much. You can then follow on and look at the project information you're going to extract. As I mentioned, the room data, the space data, as well as obviously the location and the building type. See what you want to set up there. One of the key settings to exporting the GBXML from Revit is the room volume computation. So you have a look at that. It does give you a warning anyway on export. So some final options here, you can detach the model from central. This can, if you've got this linked to a main central file, you can speed up the process. One of the key things is keeping your model as lean as possible. As I've mentioned, if you can early on, or even as the design process develops, have as few additions. Again, going back to the BIM guidance, the level of information, the level of detail and the level of information, depending at the design stage you're at, and working that in so that you can include energy analysis within your BIM process. That's one of the key things. So other things that you can help with actually within Revit itself before you get to the VE, there is in the export settings options, there's a details tab. In there you can click on the analytical surfaces option, and you can actually it gives you an early indication of what's been exported from Revit before you go through the process of fully exporting your model. And you can also isolate zones in there and see actually room by room what you're looking at there. And as I mentioned there, you can check how your levels are set if you've got any issues with that there, and check your import and export settings. So I'd like to now if we just go to switch to a demonstration. So I just want to go over everything that I've discussed there. So we've got a model here, so I'm using Revit 2016, we'll look at that first, and we'll just look at some of the points that I've discussed there. So the first thing you can see there, I'm in a section view, and there's no gaps there vertically up through the building. I've got a space placed even for the roof void areas within the model. So if I now just flick to plan view, so I'm going to my ground floor, there we go. So you can see there my model, there's a space placed throughout the model, including this riser area here. Let me just grab that. Yeah, there we go. So I've got a riser placed, I've got a space accounting for that, so I don't get any air gaps within my energy model. I've also got, you can see there's a printer point here. I've actually placed that in the model, but if we look at the properties within the dialog, the room bounding option is unticked here, so I can actually have that within the model. And if we just go to the view here, you can see it's there. Let's have a better look at that. It's in the model, but it's not actually going to, I'm not going to account for that within the GBXML export. You could zone that off using room separation lines and make that an actual zone if you wanted. So you would just draw in a room separation line adjoining these two walls, and that would export that area space, so you could apply some room data to it if you wanted. You might want to account for the printers load in that area. So if I just go back to my ground floor, so if I look at, if I just try and grab this space here, there we go, I've got that. So if I just go and look at some of the information that I mentioned, so when you select a space or a room, it'll come up in the properties dialog, and particular with spaces, you can see here, you can set whether it's occupied or unoccupied, and you can go in here and we can edit the occupancy. So I could set this to whatever, so I'll just set it to 50 people, and OK that. And you can also set electrical loads, lighting or power loads in there as well. So I'll just save that information. And as I say, I've mentioned about building up your model and tagging construction. So let's say we wanted to change the partition here. I've got it down as IES partition 2. So let's just actually change the name of that. So I'm going to just duplicate that and I'll call it BIM F 2017 and OK that. And OK that. So you'll see that's updated that partition there to that type there. So I'm just going to save that change. And now we'll do the export process. So I've set up, because I'm using spaces, I've gone in, I've already set up the areas and volume computation. So I'm just going to do export GBXML. So in here I've ticked on the export default values. I'll just go in and check. So I've got all my override options unticked there, so that's fine. And I'll just click next. And I'll save that to just cover that file. So we'll just export that GBXML. So that's that done. So if we just go to the VE, now this is VE 2016, so if I just go to File, Import GBXML, and then click on Import, and if I just go to find that folder, so just source that. So I've got that 2016 XML I've just exported there. I'm just going to click and open that. You don't need to save this. Probably good practice to do so. And that will bring up the BIM report. So it's basically applying our algorithms in the background to tidy up the geometry, which we'll come to in a few moments. So basically the report, and again the report will still be there in the Navigator. You've got your column here, bound volume, and you've got that for the raw geometry, and then your processed options. So you can see there that there's been a good success rate tidying up that geometry. So I'm just going to go back and import that. You can keep that report for further future reference if you wish. So we brought the model in. So the first thing I'll always do is have a quick check in the model viewer, have a look at how the model's looking, just in a visual check, so it's quite neat and tidy. I'll close that off. And if I just go to, I'll cancel that. We'll just switch to Apache. The first thing we'll look at is the constructions information. So I'll go to internal partitions, and we can see there the construction I changed to the BIM faculty 2017. So that's brought across that information, so you can use that. I also want to look at the room data I changed. So if I go to, you can look at the data through our tabular room data sheet, but you can use our input visualization tool. So if I go to internal gains and then go to occupancy, there we go, just change that. I set that as people, so I'll keep the units the same. And if I just apply that, you can see the chart there, the top left hand corner. It's got occupancy at 50 people, and you can see the red there showing that. Okay, so that's using 2016 V 2016 and Revit 2016. So what I'll do now is actually just go back and if I do just close that off, and I'll just go to Revit 2017. So here we have the same model, but this time, as I say, it's Revit 2017. So we'll go and look at the actual changes to the process. So we'll just go to File, Export, GBXML. So you see it's greyed out. So you need to just go to 3D View and Normally you should just save, I'll do this anyway, save that and then do it, export again, and you see the GBXML options available. I spoke about we would point you to use the room and space volumes option. Click OK, and then go to export default values and just check that you've got your overrides ticked. So that's the main key difference there. I forgot to add, you need to go to, which I'll show you in 2 seconds, make sure that the detail elements options checked in your energy settings. So I'll OK that and I'll just hit next and export that. So again, source a place that you want to place this. It's on your machine. So I'm going to put it in my folder and that's exported. And so if I just go to Analysis tab, go to your energy settings, within there you've got other advanced options, click edit there and just down the bottom check your detailed elements options ticked there. And that's, you can see there is a slight change, but there's a few things you must do to make sure that the process works. So that's fine. So what I'll do is I'll just go in and import my GBXML file and I'll just select the 2017 option and cancel that. So that's imported the model. We'll get the BIM report again and OK it. So just wanted to show what I meant by room bounding surfaces and room bounding options. It's quite common, it's particular with roof spaces. We will always advise when you place a room or a space within Revit to tie it to the levels. If however you import your models and you see a green surface here or a shade surface on your roof, it's not transferred properly to the virtual environment, and it's just because that area there has not had a room or volume correctly identifying the space. What you want to achieve is what you've got in the other roof, where you've got the blue surface, the zone surface coming right through. There's a number of reasons that can be a problem. One of the key ones is having multiple layered room bounding elements blocking the GBXML, basically pushing up through the roof option there. So what we would suggest here is to go back and fix your Revit model so that it does do what you want it to do. So we'd go back, have a look at your section in this case, and you can see here the room volume is actually not, the space volume, sorry, is not pushing up through the roof element there. You need that to go right the way up, or you'll get this air gap in your roof space. So I'm just going to see in the upper limits option it's got an offset there, so I'm just going to change that to 0 and apply that, and you can see that it's straight away it's filled that roof space. If you select it as well, you can see I've got it so that it's pushing through, just not too far above, but it's pushing up through the elements there enough that it won't have any shading surface on my roof. As I say, that's one option. The other option, there's too many room bounding roof elements that are blocking the XML pushing up, the space pushing through. So you need to choose one primary room bounding element to do that, and it's the same for, and if you look in a plan view at your model, it's the same for the wall elements as well. So I'm just going to save this and I'll just re-export. Go to my view, 3D view, and I'll just save that. Before I do it as well, so I'll just export that. Export GBXML. 2017 we're using, so we use room and space volumes, and we'll click on next and save that. So we've exported that, so that should come in a lot tidier. So what I'm just going to do, I'm quickly going to just change to V 2017. I just need to do a quick switch. And load up the So we're just loading up the VE 2017, and I'm going to go to my navigators, and this is where you, under import, in the geometry section under import BIM, you will find the new navigator. So this will allow you to give you guidance. So what I'll do is just come back to that. So I just want to talk through what we've actually produced for the Interoperability Navigator first of all. So why have we done it? We wanted to bring all the information into one place and have all the settings in one place. We've previously had the white paper, which was quite a few pages to read through, so we wanted to take out all the key points, all the points that will actually cause issues, and get right to the bits that are actually going to help you import your model successfully from other packages, in particular here with Revit. We want to give you modelling guidance, any common issues that can cause issues, put these in there. The settings, the shell import settings, as I've mentioned, we wanted to have these up front in a single place. So we've got the guidance notes as well, everything that you have there. As I said, instead of having to go to the white paper, you can just click on the link that's in the navigator and it will tell you what's the best thing to do to get around any issues that you're having. So it's a troubleshooting help guide as you're importing your model. When you bring the model in, it will come into a new quarantine zone. So before, you've basically been just given a report and it's come in and you've just look at it and see what you've got. But now we've actually wanted to give you a visual representation of this process. It gives you clarity to the process, so you can actually see the algorithms working and see what's happening. And you see the import process happening before your eyes. So it's coming into, as I say, a holding zone, a quarantine zone, before it comes into the VE on full. And there's another few reasons for this. We've improved the process of the shell correction in the background, so the actual volumes that come into the VE, we've improved how it fixes this. And we've also, as I say, we've put into those that are used to the VE, the model browser, we've put in there the actual errors of any geometry as they come across. So you can actually see these on the list rather than just having to look at a PDF document. We've also added in extra functionality, things that happen on the algorithms that are run to your model as it comes across. So the flipping surfaces so they're orientated correctly for the VE, we've put that in there as well, so you can actually visibly see that correction. So this is a list of what we've actually done. They've got the shell correction there. We've got the VE report still there as always. For 2017 release, you will have a cap volumes option, which I'll come back to, and a check gaps option. And there's a quick view front elevation tool as well. In addition to that, we've also, future development is filter surfaces, where talking about these room bounding elements, we're looking at the capped volumes, the check gaps and the filter surfaces options. These are looking at maybe you don't have the source Revit file, maybe it's done by another design team and you'd have to go back and ask them. So we're looking to try and resolve issues without fixing the originating file, trying to fix the errors as they come through in the GBXML file. You'd probably obviously want to go back to the design team that have created the originating Revit file and align these so that the next export you won't have any issues in the align. But this is things you may need to get results out you need to get simulations run. So we're understanding that point, and that's what we want these new tools. As I say, the cap volumes option I was talking about there is quite a common thing where you want to take out room volumes, but they're not actually bound properly. You can see this diagram here. The room fill is escaping next to the external boundary. It's quite a common issue. So with the cap volumes tool, we're looking to just cap that surface and just take across the actual volume that you want without this escaping part at the edge of the boundary to the room volume. So the final, this is coming out the next few months. We understand about the workflow and the process that we need to achieve. At the moment, the fourth option there, geometry and all data, that's what comes across within the GBXML. But we want to be able to control this so that you can actually choose what you want to do. So actually maybe you don't want any geometry, it's just new data that's come across. Or on the other hand, you don't want any data, you've got all the data set up in a pre-set up model that you've already run, so you only want the new geometry to come across. Or actually, it's your first run, you want geometry and only assign data. This is something, again, you can actually clean out at the moment. You can go into your tab room data and your building template managers and things. You can purge out other data that you don't want. But to save you having to do this as a secondary option, John will touch on this in his presentation, but again, you might not want to do it as a second process, so we're looking to do that as on the way through. And the final option there, the use merge wizard, is where you can actually compare and contrast a model you've already set up and run some results and compare that to a model coming in. We have changed at the moment as well the so that it doesn't actually wipe any data. That was there was a big issue with where it would, if you tried to import one model and then bring another one into that model, it would wipe everything. It's not a workflow that we would recommend anyway, but this is the tool. We want to bring in this new merge wizard to allow you to do that easily. So if we just go to the actual tool itself and we show you it here, so say it's in one place. We've got these help guides here, so best modelling guidance. You click on the link and it will give you a PDF bit of information. You can read through that. And we'll look to update that content through the Navigator all the time. So if I go back to here, so then you can go to your shell import settings. And again, these are basically the algorithms that will run, which I'll show you in a second, but these are the settings for what happens in the background. So it will go through process A, where it will look to fix shell surface orientation, and it will look to tidy up bad geometry. If that doesn't happen, then it will go to option B, where it will just extrude the volume from the floor plate, and if all else fails, it will go to option C and you can review that geometry. The settings there, number of edges and surfaces that the geometry will look at before it throws a piece of geometry out. And I always say if you've got a piece of geometry that's got more than 1,000 edges or 5,000 surfaces, etc., the simulation time will slow down, so you probably want to have a look at that anyway. So you would just click on load BIM file and source your file that you want to import. So I'll just take this V2017 file that I created earlier and open that. Again, you can save that. So that'll load in and load up the quarantine zone, so you can get an initial look at your geometry as you did before. If you want, you can then tick off that you've what you've done, and you can add in some notes in the Navigator. So you can say that you've imported it, that's fine. So you can also go to the actual quarantine view itself and just go click some options, which are linked to the Navigator as well, so you can have those working in tandem. So what we'd expect is you follow through these import check options. So you look and say, have I assigned volumes to my model, as I've discussed already today. Have I considered the ceiling voids? In there we'll give you guidance on what we see as best practice to how to handle ceiling voids. As I've mentioned, set levels, and then for 2017 you'll have this run air gaps check. So basically there we're going to run a test on your model, see if there's anywhere where there's a room or space not being placed, and you'll be able to choose which one volumes are added to your model. And again, your cap volumes, I've covered that, is we want to truncate any geometry that's coming through that's not quite to the levels of your model that you want. So you can choose to cap a whole floor to a certain level so you get the room volumes you were expecting. I mentioned about the model tree, so you can, if I just go into the quarantine zone, you can see here that there's a lot of asterisks against room volumes that are not correct. So at this point we haven't run these tidy algorithms, so what you do is just click on correct shell, and that will run through and we can look at those volumes there. So it's run through and fixed those. So we can look at the report option as well. So you can see everything's in one place, as I've mentioned. You don't have to go to some menus at the top and find information. It's all in the one place. So you've got your BIM report again. And I've mentioned you may want to look at actual information. I mentioned about the show surface normals, so you just select the zone to isolate it, and then you can right click and show these normals. So once you're happy with the model, you can then just click and import that to the VE. So that's the new BIM Navigator. As I say, I've mentioned what's coming out. It's a great time to engage with us once you've had a play with it. To reiterate Neil's comments, we welcome your feedback and your thoughts on it when you've had a shot of it, because we always want to take on board your input and put that through our development.